look at that protest site this morning too. Our cameras showing you the trucks still in position. There is an increased police presence there with the RCMP now lending support to Ottawa police, trying to bring an end to the blockade that was the subject of a heated emergency debate in Parliament last night.
This is a story of a country that got through this pandemic by being united, and a few people shouting and waving swastikas does not define who Canadians are.
Frustration and a high emotion in the House. There are conversations at all levels of government going on about how to bring an end to this protest. Janice McGregor has more on the government's options. She's in Ottawa.
Yeah, it's incredibly challenging, Heather. Justice Minister David Lametti was reflecting on this yesterday, talking about how amorphous, kind of without form or shape, this particular movement is. Yes, you do see it happening not just in downtown Ottawa, but in other places across Canada. But are there any direct conversations between these disparate groups? Is there a centrally kind of organized, plan for this? Even the groups in Ottawa, frankly, are not all united. There is no one person to talk to. Just a lot of people that have shown up and found common cause in saying how upset they are at this point. I was struck by that one comment from Windsor talking, trying to suggest that sort of the majority of people now agree that we're all fed up with this. Yes, there's a lot of frustration out there. I don't think anyone is trying to diminish that, but it then takes a leap to accept that means that everybody is on board with ending all pandemic restrictions, which is ultimately what the people dug in Ottawa are asking for here. And I think we can all understand why that's not going to happen at a time when people are still dying and hospitals are still extremely busy trying to help people with this illness. The other thing to understand here, though, is that because there are some people affiliated with these protests, not trying to claim all of them, but because some of them have been very public, it's right there on social media to read about how they want to overthrow the government. It's simply a non-starter then for the government to sit down and negotiate with people who approach it from that perspective. We had an election 6 months ago, vaccines and pandemic restrictions very much part of that agenda. Canadians have made their democratic choice, and now it falls to the people elected to govern to uphold their democracy, and it really becomes that sort of fundamental principle. But what do you do then? Well, it is about law and order. It is about enforcing the rules in a series of steps. Probably you don't go in guns blazing with the military right off the bat and risk violence and pictures that would be very damaging, and let's not kid ourselves, spread around the world. Instead, I think we see kind of a tightening process. In Ottawa, they're talking about, increasing fines, working with the province to maybe cut off insurance for people whose vehicles are still in the road, hurt people's licenses, hoping that financial penalties over time will persuade more people to leave until you just get down to a final few that perhaps eventually might need to be removed. But for that, you're going to need a lot more enforcement resources. That's what the Mayor of Ottawa has now asked for from the federal government, from the provincial government, up to 1,800 more, so that they can start actually enforcing the rules on the ground, because that has been the failure in Ottawa to this point. They would say that, people aren't supposed to be doing things, but no one would stop them. They would become emboldened, they would carry on, they would dig in, they would become entrenched. And in Ottawa, at least, that's the problem. That's why it became so much bigger and now harder to solve.
Something that did at least stop the sound of air horns, Janice, was the court injunction issued yesterday. So in terms of other options, other avenues, might we see increasingly a look to legal tools?
Yeah, really interesting, speaking of law and order, to see that it was actually a civil lawsuit brought by lawyers on behalf of local residents that made perhaps the biggest bit of progress so far. It was much quieter in Ottawa overnight as a result of the court injunction brought yesterday, part of a kind of a bigger attempt really to go after the protesters for the harm they are doing to local residents and local businesses. And it's interesting as we watch to see sort of whether that injunction succeeds in keeping the peace and the noise down in the coming days to come. The city also is investigating its options to pursue the protest organizers financially for the extra policing costs and burdens put on this city. Perhaps if the fear of jail won't deter them, financial penalties also might send a message.
That is Janice McGregor.